Prologue. Day 28. November 22. Midnight. Life can be unsettling because, to be sure, we have control over only one thing: our own actions. 28 days ago, an intercontinental ballistic missile test gone horribly wrong triggered global nuclear Armageddon. A family's life story may be replete with examples of the loss of a loved one due to sudden illness or accident. Statements such as, "I just spoke with him on the phone yesterday," or "She seemed on top of the world and in perfect health," are generally followed with shock and sadness when learning of the loved one's death. "If I had only known the day before her death," the family member might add, "I would have told her how much I loved her." You just never know when the day before is the day before. The same held true for that fateful day, Day 0, as it had become known, when a sequence of events lasting just over an hour changed life on the planet forever. The northern hemisphere became gradually colder and darker. The thousands of nuclear missiles sent aloft from North Korea, China, Russia, and the United States eventually stopped as they hit their targets. Across the Far East, Russia, Europe, and America, nearly every square mile was demolished by the blast radius, or the raging infernos they produced. Millions died on impact. Hundreds of millions would die in the aftermath as nuclear winter circumnavigated the globe. Some in America thought they had been spared, as they were not in close proximity to the many ground zeros. They were wrong. Burning buildings, chemical plants, and electric power generation facilities produced noxious smog filled with pyrotoxins that permeated the atmosphere. Man-made materials used in the construction of all types of structures spewed poisons into the skies. The layer of smog spread across the globe, mostly north of the equator, slowly killing elderly and infirm survivors, as well as the very young. Those who didn't die immediately were beset by cancer and other diseases. Not only did the pollution cause death for humans, but plants and animals perished as well. The planet immediately began to cool. The ever darker skies prevented plants from feeding off the sun's rays. As plants' growth was stifled, animals who fed off the plant material died. The food chain, from the very bottom, including grasses on the prairies or phytoplankton in the seas, to the top of their respective ecosystems, the predators, such as sharks, hawks, and man, was disrupted. Communities, large and small, suffered. Functioning governments struggled to regain their footing. Lack of electricity and the inability to communicate overwhelmed scant medical facilities. Hanging over it all, a lack of law and order stood in the way of the rebuilding efforts. Yet gritty, rugged individuals emerged as leaders. Those with a mindset centered around self-reliance and survivalism managed to continue through the turmoil. They fought back challenges by assessing their situations, making a plan, and implementing a path forward with like-minded thinkers. Across the world, people from all walks of life came together to persevere. However, conflicts arose on many levels. On Swan's Island, the home of the Bartlett family, the days of lobstering and fishing had come to an end. Many fled the island due to a lack of resources. Those who remained, like Hébert Fontenot, the longtime boat mechanic of the Bartlett family, applied his resourcefulness and abilities to solve problems. Loyal to the Bartletts, he vowed to save their home and business for their eventual return. In the meantime, he worked with others on Swan's Island to stay alive despite being forced to endure the effects of nuclear winter and the threats of mainlanders in search of supplies. In the United States, the long-standing Continuity Policy Implementation Plan, as set forth in Presidential Directive 51, was in effect. The vice president had perished during the attacks. The president, whose mind was of diminished capacity, unable to cope, killed himself to avoid dealing with the nation's suffering. An unassuming man, Harley Robertson, Speaker of the House of Representatives, was thrust into the presidency. He immediately worked to form a cabinet despite being exiled to a seemingly endless loop of air travel aboard the Doomsday plane. After surviving an assassination attempt orchestrated by the nation's former Secretary of Defense, Harley established a seat of government in Key West, Florida, the farthest point south in the continental U.S. With the aid of his new Vice President Trish Logan and General Marcus Canton, commander of the U.S. Strategic Command, Harley set about to rescue and rebuild the nation. Then reality set in. With Earth plunged into the throes of nuclear winter, the aftermath of the war to end all wars began to bring Harley's ambitious goals back to the ground. He began to question whether the American people, those who survived, could hold on for the many months necessary to reestablish the government. Over time, he was assured the cold and the dark would become less severe. The impact of the radioactive haze blanketing the planet would dissipate, along with the smog as the upper-level winds dispersed the poison. Life on the planet would thrive once again as the sun's rays reached the surface, just as they had prior to the nuclear attacks. He prayed for his fellow Americans to hold on to the cold and famine, followed by the harmful, harsh rays of the sun resulting from the diminished ozone layer in the atmosphere. As the sunlight made its way back into the lives of humans, harmful ultraviolet rays would cause untold harm to their bodies. The ozone layer acts like a shield from the power of the sun, but not after a global nuclear exchange. More and more people would have to flee regions north of the equator, or find a way to live underground for decades. In parts of the world, a post-nuclear evolutionary shift would take place, one in which tiny, fast-reproducing species would thrive, while large mammals, both human and animal, would struggle on the cusp of extinction. President Harley Robertson believed he was chosen by God to shepherd the American people through the apocalypse. To ensure as many Americans survived as possible, he reached an agreement with the president of Argentina to take in as many refugees as the South American country could absorb. There was just one catch. The war was not over.